Good afternoon. Welcome to this special Final Four edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I am Will Doran, WRAL State Government Reporter.
And because this is radio, you can't see me, but I'm making a little pack sign. Go back, go back, go back.
As a Tar Heels fan, I'll begrudgingly be rooting for them.
You're wearing a red tie. I see you there.
I am. I'm showing a little bit of pride.
Anyway, kind of a quiet week at the legislature. Very quiet, really.
Some oversight meetings, but not too many people around.
Yeah, but we did get some interesting news in a couple of those meetings, and of course at the Council of State this week, where you talked to Treasurer Falwell about the coverage for the weight loss drugs. Yeah,
so we've reported on this before, but it was the start of this month that the state health plan is no longer going to be covering Wegovy, things like that. GLP inhibitors, they're called, that can be used for weight loss, that are really booming in popularity and are pretty expensive. And the state health plan has been concerned that if these things keep increasing in popularity as they have been, then it's just going to add a massive, massive financial hit to the state health plan. They said Falwell said on Tuesday, it would potentially double the premiums for all of the individual people on the plan. So not people on the family plan, which can be more expensive, but if it's just you on the plan, your premium would go up from $25 to $50, he said, if they had kept covering these drugs. And the thing is, there's only 22,000 people on these drugs right now. There's 700,000 people on the plan. So their way of looking at it is basically like, we're asking all of these people to cover these things for a small subset of people. Not really worth it. I think the flip side of that is the number one thing in health really is obesity.
Yeah.
And so, if you have people who are in better shape and, fitter, you're not going to have as many hip problems and joint problems. You're not going to have as many heart problems. You're not going to have...
But that's in the future and it's not quantifiable.
Yeah, so, it is definitely a short-term savings for the state. I don't think there has been a ton of effort put into looking at, what could this mean in the long term. I will say that even as the state health plan is looking to get out of the game here, Medicare and Medicaid are looking to get into it. Cody Kinsley testified at the legislature, I think it was last month, saying that he thinks that they can pick up coverage of these drugs for, it would only be a few $1 million a year for the state. Of course, the federal government also pays.
Right.
For most of Medicaid funding.
Yeah. And probably, honestly, they probably are not paying as much as the state would be paying full freight.
Yeah. And some of this, I think, should be said is a little bit of saber rattling, potentially, because I contacted Novo Nordisk, who makes Wegovy. I contacted Eli Lilly, who makes another one of these drugs that's involved. And they both said the same thing that Dale Falwell said, is that they're still negotiating. So far, both sides have sent offers and counter offers that have been rejected by either side. So everyone's kind of feeling a little, some way about that. But negotiations continue. So maybe the state health plan will start again covering these drugs. But at least for the next few months, not going to happen.
Not going to happen. In the meantime, they had a presentation in the Health Oversight Committee this week about childcare. And we've talked a lot about the childcare cliff. That's not new. But, they're getting more and more sort of insistent about the urgency here of doing something about this because, there was a survey that was done in North Carolina that found, and granted, these are the people who answered the survey. Okay, it's self-selecting. Okay, fair, right? But even so, 30% of the people who answered the survey said that they would probably have to close their doors once this funding runs out at the end of the summer. And more money is needed. So I think, they've been talking about this for about a year now. And legislators, I think, were waiting to see if the feds were going to come through with funding. It does not look like that's going to happen, at least not not to the degree to which it would need to be to make a difference. So it looks like something that lawmakers are probably going to have to take up this year.
Yeah, I'll say as someone with 2 kids in childcare, it would be a big problem if our daycare were to shut down. You might not hear my voice on this podcast for a bit if I need to take a break to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I've had friends who've had to quit their jobs because they had a kid, and even though they started looking and trying to get on wait lists well before their baby was born, there's just no availability, even at the current level. So they were just, even if they didn't want to quit their jobs, they had to because they had no other option. And so, it is a problem for young parents, people who are having kids these days.
And productivity.
And, and companies who, they like their employees, like my friends who are having to quit their jobs to just, be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's something that came out of those meetings. Also coming out of those meetings, this was interesting. Looks like they've had such a big overrun due to inflation on the new DHHS campus, say that fast, over there off of Blue Ridge Road, that they've turned to a public-private partnership.
Yes. So, I mean, this has been going on for a decade now. The state sold Dorothea Dix to the city of Raleigh to make this great new park that Raleigh's building, but that's where DHHS was headquartered. So,
right, and they gave them like a 10-year window.
Yeah,
to
and
keep using the buildings, yeah.
State government, things don't exactly move fast. So, here we are 9 years later in that 10-year window, and they're just kind of starting to get the ball rolling here. But in the meantime, as we've heard in national politics, inflation has hit hard, especially in the construction industry. We looked up the numbers. It was like materials, I think, were up 40% recently. The presentation from the state said that in total, they faced inflation in 2021 of about 20% on what their bid had been. So, something that, had been maybe $600,000, $700,000 back when they planned it was going to be like $1.1 billion now. Just a huge cost overrun that the legislature was not interested in making up the difference on. And what we heard from lawmakers this week was a lot of praise for the state construction officials who managed to find some creative ways to get this done. They trimmed some fat, cut down on the size of the campus that they wanted to build, the square footage, made things a bit smaller. But then they also they didn't have to go too small because they found this public-private partnership with Highwoods, who, people will know them. They own the PNC building in downtown Raleigh.
A lot of Raleigh.
They own the Wells Fargo skyscraper in downtown Raleigh. They own some stuff in North Hills, some stuff in Cary. They're a massive real estate company, and they're based here in Raleigh, but they operate all over the Southeast. And so they are going to put in some money for DHHS to be able to move out of Dorothea Dix on time by next year and move to the new campus on Blue Ridge Road, basically right across the street from the North Carolina Museum of Art. It's a great location. I think
it is.
If people have driven by that there now, it's like a state surplus yard.
It used to be, yeah.
Like they store just like old textbooks and stuff there. And I mean, that's got to be pretty primo real estate. So Highwoods is throwing in some cash to help the state kind of get over this inflation hurdle right now. They say, all right, here's some fast cash. And in exchange, they're going to get some land at the site. It's a 34-acre site, and the state is going to give 20 of those acres to Highwoods.
I hope it's a lot of money.
Well, we don't know. I've been asking, and nobody will tell me.
Oh, my gosh.
So there are still definitely some holes in this. I went up to the construction folks after they presented to the legislature and said, okay, so, what's the deal on these numbers? And they said, things are still kind of being worked out, but why don't you call our, comms people? And they'll tell you. Well, I called the comms people. They never called me back. Reached out to Highwoods. They said no comment. And, they're free to do that. They're a, private company. Well, they're a public traded company.
They're a company doing business with the state right now. So,
but I think it's interesting, because they're a commercial real estate company, and that market has taken a huge hit with work from home, remote working on the rise. Their latest SEC filings say that that's kind of the main risk that they face to their entire business model. And so part of this deal apparently is that they're also going to sort of lease back offices from DHHS. The state is still going to own the DHHS building, but it's going to get leased to Highwoods. They described it as basically the same way that McDonald's operates its franchises, is I guess the model that we're copying for the new DHHS campus. So that'll be interesting to watch and just see how that rolls out. And I should note that is still probably a few years down the line. The first phase of this is going to start next year. And then the second phase is where Highwoods comes in, and that's who knows how many years down the line.
Right. So. And you can already see those buildings going up. So yeah, they're on the way. Also this week, there was a report delivered to the State Board of Education showing some really massive teacher turnover rates. They really spiked. It's like 11.5%. Basically, 1 out of 9 teachers working in North Carolina K-12 schools stopped working in North Carolina K-12 schools. These aren't even people who moved. These are just people who left the education system.
And what did we learn about why they're leaving?
That's very difficult because they do exit surveys, but not everybody completes one. And some of they have personal reasons. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does that entail, right?
Yeah.
So I don't get the sense that they're looking all that hard to find out exactly why people are leaving. But, we do know that some people did simply retired. Some people reached their time, and said that they want to retire with their benefits. They do count those people. What's interesting is that they, for many years now, legislators have been working to increase the number of people who can come into teaching through what's called lateral entry, right? Mm-hmm. So if you or I decided we just wanted to work our tails off harder than we do and get paid less for it, we could go be a teacher, right? Now, it's an alternate path, and you have to go through certain stages. But they found that 44% of the new hires last year were lateral entry, and 1 in 4 of the new hires last year quit, which is really interesting.
Wow. So bringing in a lot of new people, but then losing them pretty much
Losing
immediately.
them pretty quickly. So, there was some discussion at the State Board of Education about whether or not the way that – because, they have things – they've been working to mentor first-year teachers to help them set up, because we know that first-year teachers and early career teachers are the most likely to leave anyway. But they're wondering whether the lateral entry people are getting the same benefit of this, or whether they're being treated differently than first-year teachers because they're older and along in their careers. It's difficult to say, but Truitt basically said she wasn't real surprised to see this. She said, but she thinks part of it is the chronic absenteeism that teachers are dealing with. There's a lot of parents are not sending their kids to school regularly, and the teachers are still being graded on their students' performance, even if their students aren't sitting in class.
Wow.
Think about that. I mean, that's tough. And then she thought also part of it was that she said the way she put it is parents have a different relationship with schools than they used to.
That's a very polite way of
very polite way to put that. But yeah, anyway, we'll know more probably when the teacher working conditions survey comes out, and we'll get more input from that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, this is the highest it's been in this particular century that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a really hot job market too right now. And, teachers, they get paid okay, but not great. And so, right now when there's so much, new jobs being created, so much turnover in jobs, it's, it could be a little easier to step out on your own.
Yeah. That reminds me, we should take a break for just a moment for the folks who pay our bills. We'll be right back here on The Wrap. And welcome back to The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie here with Will Doran, finishing up the week that was. We learned early this week, looking at the presidential election, that RFK Jr.'s party, the We the People Party, I think,
yes,
has collected enough signatures, they say, to be on the ballot.
Yeah, I'm still a little curious as to how that's going to affect the race here if he does end up, because, in 2016, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton by, I think it was 4.5 points, but there were a lot of third-party candidates that year, and they were kind of responsible for a lot of that. There wasn't as much of a third-party candidate
in 2020
presence in 2020, and it was a much closer race. Trump only won by about 1.5% of the vote. And so, with RFK getting in, does the Kennedy name pull some, kind of old school Democrats away from Biden? Or does his stance on vaccines and things like that pull some conservatives away from Trump?
Conspiracy theories and
maybe it does a little bit of both. We haven't polled him. WRAL did some polling last month, and we just polled, head-to-head Trump and Biden. And it found that Trump was ahead by about 5 points.
But that most people did not like either.
Right. Most people want different candidates. So
right.
They are looking for some other option. And, RFK, for some people, he could be that other option. I think the biggest question is just which side does he hurt more at this point?
In the meantime, one party that did get on the ballot is not going to have anybody on it, and that is No Labels. They announced this week that they are not going to mount a unity ticket as they had planned to do. I kind of got that impression. I was thinking this was coming because you could sort of see all the people that were part of that organization sort of peeling off. Pat McCrory left, Chris Christie said no. I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that. So anyway, so they're not going to be on the ballot. I understand the Constitution Party is trying to get on there.
They're still trying. The Green Party is. They didn't have a primary this year, but they are going to have a convention where they nominate somebody.
And of course, Libertarians also.
Right. So both those parties will have their national conventions where they are expected to nominate someone. We just don't know yet who those candidates are going to be.
Right. In the meantime, the Biden administration campaign, rather, not sleeping on North Carolina. Harris was back here this week.
They are here weekly now.
Yeah, I feel like we're on a first name
At least
basis.
every other week.
Yeah, so she was Kamala Harris was down in Charlotte this week announcing money for clean energy initiatives. Of course, it wasn't clear how much of that clean energy money is going to go to Charlotte necessarily or North Carolina, but still, they came here to make the announcement. She got some flack because she was talking to Tim Boyum over on at Spectrum and said something where she was they were talking about basketball, of course, because it's Final Four week,
Yeah.
And she had said, that women's basketball had kind of been kept down for a while and said they couldn't even use brackets. Well, what she meant apparently was the Final Four branding.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to use the March Madness kind of branding as their NCAA playoffs. But of course, this opened up a can of worms, as you can imagine, on social media, and everybody's like, I can't believe she didn't get that right. And it's like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. Anyway, she does know what a bracket is. She wants you to know that she does.
Apparently, she reached out, or her people reached back out to Tim to clarify after this started blowing up.
Boy.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we should also mention that a couple other stories. DEI policies at UNC. I think you did a story on this. At least one member of the Board of Governors is saying that he thinks it's likely that the legislature will follow in the footsteps of Florida and ban DEI outright at all North Carolina universities.
I mean, we already saw the legislature take some similar steps in the 2023 session. They banned
in the hiring
practices and admissions, both for the universities, but also just all state government agencies. And that kind of started over a kerfuffle with the UNC School of Medicine and some DEI things that they had in place there that upset some folks. And so, the legislature reacted and shut that down for, hiring and promotions and things like that. But yeah, it seems that there's now this broader push to eliminate it entirely.
And this is an election year, and that's something that gets folks riled up.
Yeah, it seems to be working.
Yeah, it does. Also this year, this week, Thomas Farr died. He was a longtime redistricting litigator for the GOP. His name was pretty much synonymous with redistricting cases. I understand he passed away. He's only 69. Very sad.
Yeah, I spoke with a lot of folks who knew him and have worked with him over the years, and they said this was pretty unexpected. But to a T, everybody described him as just a completely brilliant lawyer and completely devoted to the conservative cause. He got to start working for Jesse Helms on his campaigns back in the 80s and 90s, and then transitioned more into the election law side of things, working on redistricting and voter ID and things like that. Basically the whole way that we draw state legislative districts right now is because of a Supreme Court case called the Stevenson case that
he
won.
Was on that, yeah.
So he's kind of responsible for the way that the state legislature is made up.
I don't know that he'd want that on his.
Well, I mean, the Republicans are doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And more recently, he's been involved in voter ID and in just basically every gerrymandering lawsuit. He's been defending the legislature on that. So a lot of shock when he passed in Republican circles. He was, I think, probably best known for his failed nomination under Trump to become a federal judge. Both George Bush and Donald Trump had tried to put him on the bench as a federal judge, but that went nowhere.
And Tim Scott was the...
Yeah, Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina shot him down, said that he was concerned about his racial record due to his work for Jesse Helms.
Wow. One more thing I should add before we wrap this up, and that is the State Property Office, rarely in the news, got a little shout out this week because of Umstead Park. And this has to do with a long-standing fight. It's been going for years between the people in the Umstead Coalition who don't want any development right up next to the park and Wake Stone and the RDU with Airport Authority, who had agreed to lease some property right up next to the park to Wake Stone to put in a quarry. Well, so the Umstead Coalition folks held a press conference this week to announce that they have discovered that there are 14 acres of Umstead Park that ended up being wrongly surveyed into property that was sold to the Airport Authority. And they want the state, they want the state to go in and resurvey it. Well, today, the word was from the State Property Office, no. In a word, they said they didn't think it was worth the expense. They said there might have been some mistakes, but that's not unusual. Although 14 acres is a pretty big mistake. I mean, we're not talking about a half an acre here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big park. It's 100 plus acres easily. But
it's thousands, yeah. But anyway, and it's not clear that this particular change, even were it to be the case and made, would necessarily stop the quarry, because the quarry site is also many, many acres, and this would be at the very, very northern edge of it, But at any rate, State Property Office has declined to resurvey. So the folks at Umstead have already said that they'd be happy to pay for a survey. So it is now in the hands of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and it's up to them. And I have asked if they're going to do this, and they have not replied. But then again, it is Friday on Final Four weekend.
Yeah, we'll let people get out and watch some basketball.
Exactly. So anyway, we will update that for you next week and everything else. By the way, legislator comes back next week, but not really. It's administrative. They're not really going to get back to work till the end of the month. So don't get excited or anxious, whichever it is for you, right? And we'll keep you posted next week here on The Wrap. Go Pack.